What's good, everyone? It's Zigzag here. Welcome back to another Geoguessr video. Today I have my top 10 maps that will vastly improve your Geoguessr gameplay. If you can commit these ones to memory, you're really going to excel against all your opponents. Now, I made a similar video to this back over a year ago, but I have a much wider audience now and I think I can present it better. And here is the first map, which compares the MUTCD to the European style warning signs. Warning signs, obviously, with these directional warnings are everywhere around towns and cities, and even just on country roads. And sometimes they're your only clue in terms of signage. And just knowing which ones use the American style and which ones use the European style, like most of Europe do, is very, very useful indeed. Now, some key countries to know is that Ireland here uses the American style for whatever reason, and then Asia is the place you really want to study because these are the countries that can make the difference. For example, Sri Lanka using the American style, whereas India and many of the surrounding countries such as Bangladesh using the European style. And then there's also, to keep in mind here, the yellow filled in European style signs, which would have this white section filled in yellow. And in Europe, that is Iceland, Finland, and Sweden, Poland, and Greece, and as well as some other countries that occasionally do it. Also, South Korea is in the same boat, but definitely worth learning all of those. So let's move on to the second map here, which is which countries drive left and right. Now, I'm assuming most of you guys know this, but particularly for Asia, it's most important to know which countries drive left, which countries drive right. Thailand and Cambodia would be very, very difficult to distinguish most times from one another, were it not for the fact that they drive different sides of the road. So definitely keep that in mind. Philippines is also another country that you really want to keep in mind as well. But apart from that, that's all I have to say for that. Okay, so the next one here is which countries have Google coverage. Which ones have a lot, which ones have little. It's definitely worth knowing. If you want to be a good Geoguessr player, you have to understand which countries do and do not have coverage. So for example, in Europe, you never want to guess in Bosnia, nor in Kosovo, nor in Belarus, apart from in the capital city of Minsk. Then we have many other countries. Most of Africa has no coverage, and if not, it has limited coverage. For example, all these countries in light blue are limited coverage now. So for example, in Nigeria, you never have any coverage that's actually north of Abuja. So in the top half of the country, there will never be any coverage. So it's very much worth learning where all the different coverage is. As you can see here, this is what I meant about Nigeria, where it only goes up to Abuja, and many of these other countries such as Brazil, they don't actually have full coverage. To be fair though, there's not a lot going on in the middle of Brazil like that anyway. All right, so let's move on to the next map. Next up, we have chevrons, also known as turning arrows, which you'll often have on the corner. No doubt you have some of these in the country that you live in. And Europe is a great place to get confused, and you can really help yourself out by learning which countries have which colors here. A lot of them have very unique color schemes. For example, Sweden using the Swedish colors, and then Ireland and the UK using different colors, France, Spain, Portugal, and Italy all using a different combination. So learning those can be particularly useful for those countries that I just mentioned, not to mention the whole of Eastern Europe. I mean, some countries use chevrons more than others, which is interesting to note, but all of these are very, very worth learning indeed. And so any tip in Geoguessr that allows you to cut out a whole section of countries or narrow you down to 1 or 2 or 3 countries is the best kind of tip. And so that's why chevrons are so worth learning. Okay, next up here, we have the license plate requirements in the United States. And so, in a lot of the southern states here, the states in blue, you do not have to have a front license plate. No doubt this is something you knew, but I have a feeling that there's some states that you probably don't know if you're watching this video. And so, what is important to know is that, okay, Texas and California, 2 southern states that do require front plates. Apart from that, you can make a band across here above Texas. Anything touches Texas and all the way through here is using no front plates. And then also, apart from Ohio, everything that touches Ohio is also no front plates as well as Delaware here. So that is pretty much all you need to know. Anything that touches Texas, anything that touches Ohio, and then the southeastern states here. So that is pretty much what you need to know for no front plates. Hopefully I helped you out there. But these ones are so worth learning. Of course, they can be a bit baity sometimes because cars travel, but, very much worth learning. And on the same note, we have Canada here, the same graph. And this one is interesting because actually more of the population lives in the green states. I mean, provinces, but there's only 4 provinces that actually do it. So it's BC, Manitoba, Ontario, and New Brunswick. So apart from that, I mean, some of these provinces are quite hard to tell apart. So lack of front plates can really, really be useful. And that's pretty much all there is to say about that, right? Okay, so next one we have pedestrians crossing signs. Now, all over Europe, you have all kinds of different pedestrian crossing styles and signs. Harrier has a really nice video on it, which you could check out. But suffice to say, there are a few key countries where it's very much worth learning. For example, in Poland, you have no stripes on there. For example, in Spain, you have 8 stripes. Over in Greece, you have the dotted line with no stripes, and yeah, over in Finland, they use 5 stripes, whereas the Swedish and Norwegian countries only use 4 stripes. So there's all kinds of very useful things you can use that to differentiate the Baltics, the Nordics, and all through Southern Europe as well. So definitely keep in mind your pedestrian crossing signs. And this one is probably not something you can memorize off the bat, but it is something that's worth memorizing as you progress. And you should study this map and try and commit it to memory whenever you see one. Okay, so let's move on to the next one here, which is one I always get asked about ever since I mentioned it in a video. So here is the map, and this is which countries use which road lines. And as I've said on many of my tips videos before, I do consider this to be the most important thing to learn when you're starting out in Geoguessr, because especially when you're playing no moving, you can always see the road. Unless it's a dirt road, you can always see the road lines. And so white countries that use all whites in green here, that's very much worth learning. I mean, I don't think this map is 100% accurate, so I would do my own research on top of it, or at least listen to some videos of mine or something else. But this map is pretty good, and of course the link for this presentation will all be in the description, so you can save these maps for yourself. But a few interesting notes is that all through South America, you will tend to use yellow center lines. Apart from Chile is the only country that really doesn't. But all these blue countries, you do have relatively frequent examples where they will use white lines for whatever reason instead, so good to keep in mind. Then also UAE is one country that's mentioned in grey here, and that's because sometimes they use all yellow lines in the UAE, which is quite uncommon to see around the world, but you do actually have some towns where they're using all yellow lines. And so then you also have the Irish example where they use yellow dashed outer lines, and then all the countries in yellow use the yellow outside lines, which make them very, very memorable compared to other countries. So worth keeping in mind here. Again, Asia is probably the region of the world where they just kind of do their own thing, country by country. So it's very much worth learning. Malaysia's like a great one because they use all white road lines and often white double lines in the center. So really makes it worth learning, especially when you come up against some Southeast Asia. Okay, so that's that. Moving on here, we have stop signs of the world. Now, stop signs of the world, obviously very much worth learning. Europe is interesting because they mostly all just use the English stop sign. However, there are slight differences in the font here. You can see that the Spanish sign here kind of has a thicker and smaller font, and similar looking one in France as well, whereas many other countries kind of just use a more neutral font. And so you can see in North America, in Quebec, you have Array, and then you also have many different native languages on the stop signs as well in Canada. Then Alto for Central America, Pare for South America, and then Asia's one you want to commit to memory. They use all kinds of different ones here. Also, Turkey using Dur is very useful because sometimes Turkey can look a lot like Bulgaria or Balkan countries. Okay, and then of course Israel just using the hand, which is completely goated. I mean, no one else could think of that. It's just too smart. Okay, so that is pretty much all I have to say for that, but obviously commit this to memory, and there's a lot of stop signs around the place, so you can definitely use that. Okay, and on to the speed signs of the world here. And so it is very much worth learning in particular territories, in particular countries, what speed limits you can go to. For example, in Australia, my own country, you can go up to 130 kilometers per hour in the Northern Territory, whereas every other state is 110. And so if you see a 130 and you know you're in Australia, well, you can get an easy state or, territory send here. And then USA is very useful for this. Obviously, they're using the speed limit signs rather than the kilometers per hour signs, but you can see that all through the US, they have different maximums. And so if you just memorize that, this region here is more likely to have 75 plus speed limits, whereas Texas even goes up to 85, and the other states go much lower, then you can definitely use that to narrow down guesses, and it can be super useful, especially if you're considering two state borders where you see a high speed limit in South Dakota, you can't see one in Minnesota, and they're two states that can look quite similar. Okay, and then Europe, obviously, as well. Some countries not quite going as high as 130, which a lot of countries do, so keep that in mind. I mean, Norway never even going past 110. And then, then there's plenty of other countries here. It's a very extensive map. I'm not sure if it's 100% accurate. Probably these laws change all the time, you see, but I think it is very useful nonetheless. And so there you have it, guys. I hope you guys really enjoyed this one. It was a really fun one to make, and I can always come through. I have a lot of material saved on my computer, so I can always come through with another one of these if you guys so wish. But yeah, guys, I hope you really enjoyed the video. Let me know if there's any world maps. Send me any world maps if you can think of any that I really should cover. And I'm most happy to do another one of these in the near future. So guys, thank you very much for watching the video, and I'll see you guys in a video very soon. Goodbye.